I'm Joyce Hornady. You might say accuracy is my business. I make bullets.
You are listening to the Hornady Podcast.
Thanks for joining us and enjoy the show.
Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Hornady Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Seth Swerzik. Across the table from me today, Preston Lentfer. Preston, thanks for joining me.
You bet.
And also thank you for procuring our new podcast sign.
Well, all thanks goes to Monty. Hopefully he listens to this and gets the recognition he deserves.
Right on. So we got a new podcast sign. And like I said, thanks for sitting down with me. And I'm pretty excited today. We've got a really great guest that's been in the industry for a while and has really spanned a lot of cool things between here and there. And so we'll get to sit down and really talk about each one of those different actionable items that he's been involved with. A man that likely needs no introduction in the long-range game. But Ryan Cleckner, thanks for joining us on the Hornady Podcast.
Hey, guys, thanks for having me on. And I love that new sign. That really does look good.
Awesome. So, Ryan, like I mentioned to the listeners early on, I mean, you've really had a really broad career in all things shooting, but shooting in and of itself is kind of a niche category that we're in, and you've really had a chance to do a lot of it. And before we get there, I want to give not only our listeners but Preston and I a chance to see what really led up to that. Most stories start at the beginning. So, where'd you grow up? What was 8-year-old Ryan Cleckner doing running around?
Well, I was born at a very young age, and grew up in a hunting and shooting family. Grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, but
Nice.
we spent our time all over Arizona. So Phoenix is just a big city. I try to tell people it's like LA light, just a bunch of concrete and houses. But all around Arizona is just great opportunities for shooting and for hunting and for everything else like that. So I don't even know how young I was when I started shooting. I get asked that a lot, and I have no idea. That's how young I was. I grew up being carried around on my dad's shoulders, archery elk hunting. It's just that's how before I could walk along with him, he carried me around. And I actually do remember being young enough one time. He found a bull, took me off his shoulders and put me down by a tree, had me hug the tree, and said, "You can't let go. I'll be right back." And
Wow.
he left me holding onto a tree where he went and got a bull and came back. So it has been since I was that young, going around learning how to hunt and do those kind of things. It was just a hobby of mine, and I never expected to join the military. It was went to college for a year, maybe 2, and just wasted time. No offense to any of the listeners out there this applies to, but I'm of the opinion that 18 to 22-year-old males can sometimes be pretty useless, and that's what I was. Yeah, I
I've
was,
been one.
a little misguided, because at that age, you don't have a career yet, right? You don't know what you're going to do for a living yet. You don't, it's hard to kind of make your way at that age. And out of nowhere, even though I normally turn recruiters down, a recruiter came along and I said, "What the heck? I'll sign up and go." And in a whirlwind, I woke up in basic training, regretting my decision as I'm getting yelled at, not getting to sleep in on my mom's couch.
Yeah.
And I signed up with a Ranger contract because I heard one time about what an actual Ranger battalion was and thought that would be cool. And I went through the pipeline. Somehow I made it through RIP. That's what they called the indoctrination program at the time, the Ranger indoctrination program. I don't know how I made it through, but I did.
Were you an
And-
athlete going in? Were you an athlete
No.
in high school or an athlete in
No.
college?
No, and when you look around, so this is going to segue later when we talk about how I like to teach stuff. I don't ever approach or try to approach anything with, "Look how tough and cool and awesome I am, and look how hard this is." I take the exact opposite approach. I say, "Hey, I'm nobody special. If I can do it, you can too. It's not that hard. Here's a simple, fundamentals. Let's work on those. Let's make it work." For long range shooting, I'll say to people, yes, the spin of the earth technically will affect where your bullet impacts, but maybe you should focus on being able to shoot at least a minute of angle first. Like, let's not even worry about the spin of
Right.
the earth yet. Right? Let's just worry about fundamentals. As a matter of fact, if you never took the spin of the earth into account, but just spent your whole life mastering everything else, you will be a much better and more effective shooter than the guy who is ignoring the fundamentals and everything else and doing the latter. So I like to simplify things. So No, I'm not the coolest, toughest. I mean, when I showed up to RIP, there was 126 of us, and they said, I remember the opening speech, they said, look around, we're taking 12. So it's going to get harder for the next 3 weeks until enough of you quit. You can only quit. You can't fail out. Until enough of you quit that we have 12 of you left. And I looked around, and at least half the guys looked like they belonged on a recruiting poster for a Ranger battalion. Not me. I mean, just like tough, awesome-looking dudes sitting around me going, well, how am I going to make it? Somehow I made it. And I'll admit that I felt like when I was in the Ranger battalion, every morning I woke up, and it was a dig deep gut check just to try to be mediocre. Because it was just such an amazing group of men. You know, it was, I was never a runner. At the time I was 6'2" and 220 in the best shape of my life. That's a big guy for being super in shape compared to these like normal, using the term special operations kind of loosely because, you know, the Ranger Battalion's kind of the redheaded stepchild of the special operations community. We're the young ones for sure. We had a guy in my platoon that could do the Army 10 miler in under an hour. That's 10 consecutive sub 6 minute miles.
Wow.
I can't keep up with that.
No.
That's not me.
No. Hard
These
pass.
guys were machines. So anyway, yeah, so I enjoyed my time. I learned a lot. And I was about ready to get out and maybe go be a helicopter pilot or something because I knew that you don't find old Rangers. You know, guys from an actual Ranger Battalion Rangers usually they get out or they usually go Delta Force. I think something like almost 2/3 of Delta Force is former Ranger Battalion guys.
Oh, wow.
It's just kind of like the feeding ground for it.
I guess.
And it's because being a young Ranger is great, but they don't make it old because your body breaks or your mind breaks. And I was getting ready to leave, and an opening in the sniper section opened up. And at the time, there was only 6 Ranger snipers at a time per battalion. So when that seat opened up, a whole lot of people wanted to go take that seat, and they were going to give it to somebody else. But they asked me if I would tear up my warrant officer packet to leave the battalion if I would stay. Would I tear it up if they gave me the seat? And I said, sure. So next thing I know, I'm over at the sniper section. I'm starting over again. Right when I thought I was cool and had life figured out, I showed up to the sniper section, had no idea what I was doing. I was the new guy. And because of the training cycle, they sent me to SODIC, which is, in my opinion, the premier sniper school in the world. They sent me to SODIC in my first week or two being there in the sniper section. And the first time I pulled the trigger on an M24 was in SODIC, and I had to pretend like I knew what I was doing. It was hilarious.
Wow.
Because everyone else in this school had been a sniper for 15 years. You know, and
Wow.
yeah, so I just learned trial by fire and
Yeah.
started to learn how to shoot there. And SODIC was an amazing course. And that's what turned me on the most to the sniper stuff. It wasn't just my next job. It was, this stuff is cool. I mean, you had an actual shooting coach sitting behind you all day, every day, just coaching you to shoot and getting better at this kind of stuff. And then from one school to the next and a couple deployments to Afghanistan, I realized I had a great time in the military, but it was time to get out. Well, leave the party while I'm still having fun.
Yeah.
And left, finished school, taught at a government contracted sniper school for years out in Arizona. And that's honestly where I learned most of what I teach now. Even though SODIC was a great school, even though I was around amazing instructors and amazing people, and I learned a lot, there's a bit of a problem in the military with some of the schools. 2 big problems, actually. One is information is regurgitated just because that's the information that they were taught.
Mm-hmm.
You get told some pretty stupid things in basic training, for example, that are dead wrong about how guns and bullets work.
Yeah.
Because that's what the person before them told them. So we were still learning kind of Vietnam era concepts for shooting. The other thing that I think is wrong about military training schools, a lot of them, is they're more of a test than they are a school. You know, instructors will brag that they have a 50% attrition rate in their school, that their school is so tough that half the people don't pass. Well, I love teaching. I would never brag that I was unable to teach half the people that came to me.
Right.
Right.
Right? I think it's more impressive to be able to have everyone pass. But anyway, so as an instructor, I started learning better ways to explain things. I started learning concepts and seeing things didn't really add up. And let me try that out. And does this really matter? You know, we were really doing short barrels earlier than I think most anyone out there.
I was going to ask that. What year you kind of made that transition?
I started teaching out there in 2003.
Okay.
I believe, or 2004, we were sawzalling barrels off. We were, just to prove a point, we would take, you know, a Remington 700 police, taking a sawzall out there in the desert, Dan Herman, he founded the Marine Corps Mountain Warfare Snipers course. He and I were the 2 instructors for years together. Good guy. And he'd be sitting there on the Sawzall, and I'd be squirting gun oil on the Sawzall blade as we'd cut through someone's barrel, cut it down to like 18 inches. And then we had a hand reamer that you could put a collet in the barrel, and it would kind of give you a crown.
Sure.
We'd cut a rough crown in the barrel and shoot the gun, and we could watch the group before we cut the barrel to the group after immediately tighten up. And that's where I started even learning that theory on shorter barrels are more accurate, and started exploring that and testing that more and figuring out what's going on. So anyway, I did that for a while, went to law school, and from there I got into the firearms industry. I started working for the NSSF.
Very cool.
And I was federal government relations. I left there and went to Remington. And for Remington Outdoor Company, I ended up being a vice president, and I ended up being on the SAMI board, which is where Steve Hornady and I know each other, and have a lot of great stories that I'm not going to share on this podcast of our fun and troublemaking together. And from there, just decided to go out on my own as an attorney after Remington, and hated that because being an attorney is miserable. So I wrote my own book thinking I wanted to write a book before I died.
Really?
And I wrote, even if only my mom or my best friend wrote it, who cares? I just wanted to say I wrote a book. So I wrote the Long Range Shooting Handbook because some of the videos I've done that Preston, you said you've seen from the NSSF, or some of the things I've taught before, if I could see one thing in common, my brand was, like I said before, making things seem simple, not making them complicated. So I just took that same approach to the book, and every publisher I went to turned me down or ignored me. And so I said, forget you guys, I'm going to publish it on my own. So I had to publish it myself, and as you guys know by now, it took off more than I ever expected, and it's been a great resource, I think, for a lot of people getting into shooting. And that's when I realized I'd rather do things on my own. So I keep writing books. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, for anybody listening or watching, and you've not you've not dove into long range shooting, or just accurately shooting for that matter, a lot of the fundamentals are in there. You really should take a look at Ryan's book, Intro to Long Range Shooting. Yeah,
from a beginner standpoint, I'd been in the industry and doing some long range stuff, and then shooting competitively. And my father wanted to like, wow, my son's shooting, at ranges like this, and I want to do that too. So we built him a rifle, and he's been a gun guy his whole life. Built him a rifle, and I got him that book because it was digestible. Because he's, at the time he was 58 or 59 years old. He's not on his phone very often. He's barely using the internet, but he could read that book, read some of the fundamentals, read some of the fundamentals of getting a ballistic solution to put on the gun, stuff like that. So yeah, if you, like you mentioned, Preston, if you haven't checked that book out, definitely do so, because it's useful, and it is well written, and I think the best word I can pick to describe it is digestible.
Easily, yep.
Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate it. That was the goal, is to make it kind of a for dummies book.
That other book that you've written, that's a children's book, and Preston and I are parents to young children, and I think that one's probably lesser known, I would bet, of the books that you have written.
I've done a couple projects strictly because I got tired of talking about how gun control won't work and not saying what will. So, I every once in a while I go on Fox, I'll go on Tucker or Neil Cavuto or one of those really cool shows, which, by the way, is still super nerve-wracking right before it goes live. I will admit that. I get super nervous before the camera turns on, because you're going into millions of households and you hope you don't, say something stupid. But anyway, I get on those shows and I say, gun control won't work. This is why it won't work. Look at all these things. And I was bothering myself that when I got done saying how gun control won't work, I think it invites an obvious question. Well, then what will?
Right.
So I'm trying to have safer gun ownership. I'm trying to get more people to own guns. And I think, children being hurt with unsecured guns or not understanding gun safety is unforgivable, and it's completely preventable. So I wrote the children's firearm safety book only so I could say, one, I'm trying my best to do something. I sell it for as cheap as I can to make nothing on it, so it covers the printing, because I'd rather give it away if I could figure out how to do that. But it's a story for parents to get the message also, not just the kid, because kids need to know gun safety, but it's the parents that are the ones that leave the gun laying around, not the kid. So if we can get parents to stop doing that, that'd be good too. And then I started Mayday Safety, partnered with Kyle Lamb on that one. And we made a whole software company and app and everything to help respond to emergencies and school shootings and stuff like that, purely because I got tired of coming up again with reasons why gun control wouldn't work to stop school shootings. Maybe I need to put my money where my mouth is and come up with something that will work.
Wow. Novel in this day and age.
Yeah, yeah, great advocacy stuff there. And so where we branched off there was you said you were out on your own doing the lawyer thing and decided that wasn't for you. Well, when did you make that transition to decide what does work for you? Obviously, you wrote the books just to say you wrote books, but they turned out to be home runs. What was the next step?
Well, so the books solved themselves. So when I left Remington, I was getting paid to sit on the sidelines. So I had like 6 months to sit at home and do nothing. So that's why I figured I might as well write the book. And then I went into being a full-time lawyer. And it was about a year after being a full-time lawyer where I was just like, this is for the birds. I don't like this. I can charge a lot per hour, but I still got to work that hour. And I still got to inherit everyone else's problems and try and solve all their problems for them. And it took about a year for me to look back at the book sales and realize, oh, the book did better than being a lawyer. What am I doing? I'm going to stop being a lawyer. So from there on, I either do books or I started Rocket FFL. That's another thing I did because the type of law I practice obviously is firearms related because that's what I do. And I was helping FFLs all across the country fight the ATF or stay out of trouble with the ATF or get their FFL. And I realized pretty quick that if I could package this, instead of having someone pay me my attorney rate to talk to them on the phone and walk them through the process, if I could just videotape it and sell the courses, that might be cheaper and easier. So I started Rocket FFL. And that was the next thing that I just been lucky and blessed with that took off and has gone well. And so I just roll that into the next thing that allows me to have a life to hang out with my kids and shoot and hunt and talk to you guys during the day because these other things are going on. And the biggest project right now by far is Gun University.
Okay. Yeah, let's talk about that.
Everything's got the story of why I did it, like the Rocket FFL. Well, Gun University was, I don't want to make enemies here. I mean, you got to make enemies sometimes in life, but I don't want to make enemies.
Sure.
I got tired of talking to people, always asking me what gun they should get. You guys probably get the same thing. You meet somebody at some family event or some function, like, oh, here's Seth or here's Preston. They work in the firearms. And then someone's going to go, oh, what gun should I get? Well, my standard response is, I don't know. What car should I get? And they stare at me and they go, what do you mean? I said, what car should I get? You can't answer, can you? Because if you kind of need to know if I'm going to haul lumber first. Because if I need to haul lumber, you're going to recommend a pickup truck. But if I want the best gas mileage, you're going to recommend a Prius. And by the way, they're both horrible at each other's job. So you need to know more information. So I would use that as an analogy, and I talked to him some more about it. And what I started noticing was that the information that people had about what gun they liked before they asked me that question was based off what they read in gun magazines or gun blogs or gun review videos. And I could not believe how a good chunk of these people had horrible advice, in my opinion, which is what they're asking, horrible advice for a gun to start with or for gear to get. And how could you think that's what? No, your daily carry should not be a Taurus Judge. Where did you get that idea from? And they said, well, I looked at this magazine and that magazine, and I looked at these 10 gun blogs, and they all said that the Taurus Judge is the best thing ever for self-defense for CCW. And they're right. Unfortunately, a good chunk of our industry, not everybody, but a good chunk of our industry, has an article about, or a review about, or a press release about, or something about a new product, and all you see is how it is the best gun ever, how it's groundbreaking, how it's the best for CCW, nothing else matters. And when these new shooters are out there, and all they're reading about every single gun is how every gun is the best,
It's very confusing.
they're actually not really getting any good information.
Right.
And I realized that the reason, yes, well, and I don't mind that people take advertisements. It's okay. Like, you guys are going to promote and like Hornady products. I know that, and it's okay because you work for Hornady. As long as you're telling people that, though, that's okay. The problem I found is some of these gun magazines and gun blogs, they weren't really making it clear that they were sponsored by a certain company when they were saying that gun was the best. So we made Gun University because we wanted the spot for people for free to learn about guns, simple things like how to adjust your scope or what rifling is, but also to learn about honest reviews about guns from a website that takes 0 sponsors. So we kind of have a bill of rights or rules pasted on Gun University that says we will never take sponsorships. We will never promote a certain product. We will never take free guns or free product. So if a company sends us a gun to review, that gun has to go back. And some guns get bad grades. But also, we don't just talk about the gun. Like, for example, one of our most popular articles is best 9mm pistols, because people will search for that. If you look at our best 9mm pistols article, we break down what we think the best overall is, what we think the best for different categories are, because again, the use matters. I think this one's best for CCW, this one's best for the range, this one's best for competition. We break it all down. But then we go down in the article too, we say, hey, you're going to need ammo for this thing. And if you're new to guns, you may not know what you need for ammo. I go through and I recommend, here's what I like for just a range training practice ammo. Here's what I recommend for CCW ammo. Matter of fact, you guys should go fact check this. If you go look at the best 9mm pistols article on Gun University, the recommended CCW ammo is Hornady Critical Defense. So right there, people get a chance to see what my personal favorite round there is for self-defense. You have to go look it up. Matter of fact, do me a favor, guys. If you just put the link in the show notes and people can follow it there and they can go look at the link to that article.
Put it down there.
But we're trying to guide people in the right direction, and then safe gun storage and ear protection and all those things. So it makes some people mad. There are some gun companies out there where I'm already persona non grata because I gave their gun an F. But I take pictures of and take videos of why I gave it an F and maybe recommend something else instead.
What'd you pick as the best 9mm? If you don't mind me asking.
Or
best 9mm for it depends for which category. Yeah, it depends.
Yeah, all the categories.
So Preston,
Did you have an
I
overall?
get picked on for that all the time too. No, I didn't have an overall. I went by category. So the Preston said it depends.
Okay.
My legal clients, because I still keep some legal clients, they pick on me for saying that because I can't answer a question without saying that. Hey Ryan, what's the answer here? Well, it depends. My daily carry is a 365. It's a SIG 365.
Beautiful.
So for that, I love that pistol. If I could only have one 9mm for the rest of my life, it'd probably just be a Glock 19 because that's probably the most utilitarian for me, and I'll, probably going to work the longest.
Yep,
Yeah,
can't argue with that one.
That's a neat website design. I guess I think you'd call it a design that you take no advertisements, no free product, nothing to help sway your view. It's really just a completely removed type of opinion piece where you're looking at product features with no other involvement from the company, and that's probably really novel. I bet there's probably no other places like that to get that type of information from.
We like it. I mean, if someone wants to copy it someday, we're okay with that. It's not a completely original idea. It's just new for our industry. And good information that you can trust. And so I'll get some flack when I'm negative on a product, which I get because a lot of the people that are looking up these articles, reading the articles, are a fan of that product. That's why they're on that page. But I try to remind people in the comments, I get you don't agree with me here. That's fine. Because, by the way, if we both agreed on everything, you shouldn't be reading this website. You're wasting your time. Because if we completely agree on everything, don't read it. But just remember this next time. When I'm so negative on this product, and maybe you think it's unfair that I'm negative on this product, at least just remember that I wasn't afraid to do that. So next time when I talk about how there's a product I love, you can trust me. I'm not just saying it's a product I love because I'm a shill. I'm getting paid for it. There's when you guys first came out with 300 PRC, I took a lot of flack for that because I'm very slow to warm up to new cartridges. So I'm usually pretty anti new cartridges until they can prove themselves. I mean, my long-range shooting handbook came out 6 years ago, and I haven't even updated it yet. I still recommend 308 in there. That's how outdated it is, because I still wasn't on the 6.5 Creedmoor bandwagon yet. I was still waiting to see if it was really going to stick and take off. Because at the time, I still was wondering, should I get a 260 Remington or 6.5 Creedmoor? Well, now 6.5 Creedmoor's clearly taken over, and I can recommend that now. So that's how slow I am for new products. So when like 30 Super Carry comes out last month, I trashed it. I just trashed that up and down. Maybe I was especially cranky that day, I don't know. But I just thought that was a product that made no sense to me. And I went through all the reasons why I thought it made no sense and made a lot of people upset. But 300 PRC might be the only cartridge that came out where immediately I went, this is the ticket. This is the one I want. This is why this is great. And I went and I laid out why I thought SOCOM made a mistake by going with a 300 Norma instead of 300 PRC, even though it's a much weaker cartridge, and I went through all the benefits of why I thought it was better. And to this day, that still gets negative comments from people that get mad at me about it, but I stand behind it. And I have some reasons on why I think that's the good cartridge. And sure enough, you're now seeing things now in the government is going away a little bit from that 300 Norma because they're realizing the mistakes and the problems they have with it.
They're starting to see the shortcomings that you saw or that we saw when we developed it. You can't hide those, and so eventually the groups that have adopted it, that stuff's going to come to light. You're gonna see what problems there are. You can only hide them for so long, and when they rear their head,
things look really good on paper, but they also have to work in the real world too, and that's where that little battle of the cartridges, the PRC, definitely wins.
I agree. I say the same thing, Preston. I say, on paper, every year there's going to be a new cartridge that comes out and wins on paper. Every year. That doesn't mean it has what it takes to actually perform. And I brought that one up, one, because obviously it's you guys in 300 PRC, but two, that's one of the ones I'm proud of because I feel vindicated on. People were upset for a few years on that one, and now some of these significant units are specifically switching to 300 PRC over the other cartridges. And yeah, I remember when I got a couple boxes before you guys came out with it officially of 300 PRC, to test. Like, I think Steve actually hooked me up. I emailed him. I'm like, hey man, can I get some of that to borrow? So he sent me some boxes, and I went and shot a bull in northern New Mexico, a bull elk with it. And I was so happy about it because this, cartridge isn't even out yet. And so I take a picture holding up the box of ammo, sitting there behind the bull, all proud of myself. And I sent it to, I forget who it was. It was one of your ballisticians or engineers and Steve with like the caption in the email from the field, first elk taken with 300 PRC. And they came back with, no, Ryan, that's like the 10th elk. we've already been shooting elk with a 300 PRC, so I was pretty bummed. I thought it was a first, but nope.
Well, that cartridge
lasted a very long time as a
wildcat, essentially. Well, it's hard to say wildcat.
Skunkworks project for years before it came to life.
Yeah, that cartridge was really designed for the most part in 2007, 2008 timeframe, and there was brass with no head stamp. And yeah, there's Neil Davies, our marketing director, and Joe Thielen, our assistant director of engineering. They'd taken several elk by the time the cartridge was getting ready to be released.
Yep, that was a long one.
Yeah, still absolutely hammered the elk, though, it sounds like. I mean, that is the all-range elk cartridge, no doubt.
For sure. My two cartridges now, if I could narrow them down, because that's the other question I always get asked, right? What cartridge should I get for long range? Answer is whatever one you can afford. I mean, any cartridge is fine to learn how to shoot. But out to 1,000, 1,200, 6.5 Creedmoor. That's all I want to shoot. And then out to a mile, 300 PRC. Those are the two cartridges I bring. So that's where I go with it.
Yep. Things can get very simple. We both cut our teeth on, well, you cut your teeth on a 308. I cut mine on a 6.5 Creedmoor.
Yeah, there was a lot of 308 wasted in my early days of shooting stuff far away. But it was fun, and you learn a lot, and you learn how the application of fundamentals bridges all shooting sports and equalizes any shooting situation. Is the same application of the same fundamentals always works regardless of what you're shooting. And once you really hone those, that's when the benefit of the 6.5 Creedmoor really fleshes itself out. When you get good at shooting a 308 and then you take the training wheels off and you got something that bucks the wind twice as good, it's a remarkable feeling.
That's also why I don't like chasing the new cartridge. When something new, whiz bang, awesome comes out and everyone wants to change to it. That's why I held out on 308 so long. Sure, 6.5 Creedmoor is flatter. Sure, it has less recoil, has all these other benefits, but 308 worked for me, and it wasn't enough to convert all my guns over to 6.5 Creedmoor, just to convert them to the next cartridge the year after. But once I realized it was staying power, okay, now I'm going to shoot it. Now it's, affordable and available and stuff like that. But you're right, it's the fundamentals that matter. Whether I just up a little more or up a little less on my scope is not meaningful to making the actual shot.
That's right. Well, and to be fair, the 6.5 Creedmoor took a long time to get the traction that it obviously has now. I mean, that thing was released in 2007 officially, and it really didn't take off for years later.
Yeah, I would say 2016, 17 timeframe before it became really well established. So it was out for near a decade before it really got popular.
I'm glad I waited, because if I jumped at the first opportunity for a 6.5 millimeter bullet going about that speed in a cartridge case about that long, my gun safe would be full of 260 Remington rifles right now. I mean, they're not the same cartridge, but they're kind of close.
That's right.
And if I would have jumped right away, I would have had those. So I'm glad I waited to see which one had staying power. And that's why I finally became a fan of the 300 PRC, was because of the 6.5 Creedmoor. I know you guys will probably not like to hear this, but to me, the 300 PRC is just the bigger 6.5 Creedmoor. Proportionally, dimensionally, it's like proportionally about the same neck length, bigger. You shake your heads, no?
Don't mind it. Actually, in fact, love it.
Okay, well, that's what I think you guys should have called it.
No, shaking our heads. Yes.
Okay, I couldn't see.
I mean, really.
When I look at it, I go, your neck length, yes, when it came out, that's the first thing I said. Came out 300 PRC, I looked at it. I looked at dimensionally, I went, well, the neck length proportionally, this dimension, that looks like someone just put a 6.5 Creedmoor picture on a Xerox copy machine and said increase by 130%. Like, why is it not the 300 Creedmoor? That's why I wanted you guys to call it so bad, because then it would have also made more sense, I think, in my mind of why one's the small, one's the big. But the reason I knew right away I was going to like it is because what finally won me on the 6.5 Creedmoor was I don't believe there's an inherent accuracy to any kind of round. It actually kind of bothers me when say, oh, I used to have this kind of handgun, but I got rid of it because that cartridge is not inaccurate. God, accurate just means it goes the same spot every time. I don't care what path it took to get there. I don't care if the bullet knuckleballs through the air. As long as it hits the target in the exact same spot, it can be a super accurate round. It's the forgiveness of those dimensions, meaning I knew that with the 6.5 Creedmoor, I finally learned just about any decent 6.5 Creedmoor ammo works in about any decent 6.5 Creedmoor rifle. Something about those dimensions and forgiveness of everything allowed it to work in a wide range of applications, and that's why I finally fell in love with it. Whereas 308 seemed to be more sensitive to me on this brand of ammo versus that brand of gun, things like that. And so when I saw the same for 300 PRC, I was like, oh, well, that's going to be very forgiving and accurate in a wide range of rifles without having to be custom tuned. I'm going to start buying that.
Yeah, but we really did that. Basically, what you said made a 300 Creedmoor, and when we design the cartridge and chamber, we do that at the same time. And there are some dimensions and some lengths and some geometry that we know work really well. And a lot of that, was implemented with the Creedmoor, but a lot of that had been going on at Hornady for a long time, because we have a group of shooters that design reamers and build their own rifles, and so we know some dimensions that work and that lend themselves to forgiving accuracy, for lack of a better term. And we basically just scale that up to whatever we need it to. And that 300 PRC dimensionally shares very much the same attributes that the 6.5 Creedmoor, the 6 Creedmoor, the 6mm ARC.
You can have the most inherently accurate looking cartridge, but as long as the chamber is terrible, it's going to shoot terrible.
Yeah, the chamber is the big one.
Together.
It's not so much the inherent accuracy of a cartridge as much as it is the inherent accuracy of a certain chamber dimension. And when you introduce to Sammy those chamber dimensions that are forgiving and that let that bullet hand itself off into the rifling really straight, you're avoiding principal axis tilt or keeping it to a minimum. That's where you're going to get a cartridge that just shoots well from any rifle, any decent factory ammo. It just shoots well. And it's all about balance. And the cartridge case size really becomes just a corollary. The cartridge case size is that size because this is how much length we had. to fit within our parameters. And none of our cartridges that we have designed and likely will design are going to be the fastest trip down the drag strip, because hot, nasty speed only gets you so far ballistically. You have to let the efficiency of the bullet, the accuracy of the system, and the tightness of your extreme spread on your muzzle velocity. That's what really makes for long-range accuracy on the average.
That's a much better way of saying it. That's what I call it forgiving. Like, the design doesn't make it accurate, but it's how everything works together and allows it to work, right? I love it, guys. Do you think I see it taking off as much, or you think it's going to take a while for people to realize what 300 PRC is?
I think as a whole, ever since the Creedmoor, I think hopefully people see the designs that we're putting together, 6.5 PRC, 300 PRC, 6 Creedmoor. We had a hand in some other things as well that are little smaller boutique companies or whatever, but I think people will see that we're designing the chamber and the cartridge together at the same time, and they know that with Hornady backing it, we've got friends in the industry too. They'll make ammunition for it likely, and I think
Brass.
the stuff that we're making is here to stay.
Yeah, I think it's definitely taken off. There's no doubt there that it is popular. It's established. We've got major gun manufacturers chambering it. You can buy factory rifles. I think one of the if you were to say anything in opposition to it, I would say that the 6.5 PRC, which is just the little brother, the 6.5 Creedmoor on steroids, if you will, the 300 PRC is a handful. You put it in an AI chassis on a 17-pound gun, easy to shoot. You put it in a 9.5-pound hunting rifle, and it's a handful. So a 300 PRC is not the everyman's type of hunting cartridge because it's a big 30 cal Magnum. Now, if you're shooting a 300 Win Mag or something, or 300 Weatherby, it's right in there with that, so it's applicable. But the 6.5 PRC, just from a popularity contest, it's way more mild, way easier to shoot from a shootability standpoint. So I don't quite see the 300 PRC going anywhere anytime soon. It's definitely established. All the cool kid guns are factory chambered, but I think the size of the cartridge, the weight of the bullets, and the amount of recoil for the everyman, it might be a little bit on the big side.
Fair. I don't like it.
I think that's fair.
I love to me, so I like cartridges that bridge gaps. That's great, but I don't have much of a need for them because, probably like you guys, I'm at the point where I have too many guns. I have too much gun crap. I have too many bins full of magazines that I don't know which magazine fits what. I got to keep it all sorted. Too many scopes. I mean, listen to me. Complain about this for the people listening. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But when you
First
get to
world
this point in the
problems.
firearms industry, when you have all these things, I actually have less guns that I could just grab and go and use right now. Once you get too many, none of them are ever set up as the hunting rifle. Like right now, if someone said, run to the airport, meet me here, we're going hunting, I'd have to go set up a gun because I'm always swapping scopes and things are always moved here and there, and I don't have anything all set up for it. But I don't want to add new cartridges if I don't need to. So if I don't need to bridge the gap, I won't. So for me personally, 6.5 Creedmoor, 300 PRC are the two I'm using now for almost everything I get. Not just hunting and not just long range. The last 4 elk I've taken have been 6.5 Creedmoor. I took 6.5 Creedmoor to South Africa and shot everything there, plains game with it. Probably undergunned. Probably the bare minimum threshold I should have been shooting. But if you shoot an animal in the heart, they die.
Yeah,
And
you can kill anything with anything.
Every one of these
the
I've
bullet
had
goes where you want it.
Yeah. You just don't have as much error, margin of error for sure with it. But since 6.5 Creedmoor is so light for me, I don't jump to the 6.5 PRC because I don't want another cartridge to carry around. But for my light, low recoiling, flat shooting gun, my Creedmoor does it. And if I want something bigger, that 300 PRC does it. My only complaint for the 300 PRC is the length. I know it has to be that length to work, but it's just barely too long to work in like a Tikka. And I love Tikka rifles. So it's just slightly too long to get in those actions. But yeah, it recoils. But like you said, 300 Win Mag. How many guys shoot a 300 Winnie and it's fine for hunting? Or heck, they do something which I think is crazy, like shoot a 300 Rum. That's insane to me, out of a light hunting gun. So we're bigger guys. We can handle it. For an all-around North America can handle anything. That's kind of what I'm going for now. And of course, I got my dad's old 30-06 that I keep for nostalgia purposes. But even though 30-06 is quite a bit weaker, I don't know. It still hits my teeth, I think, just about as hard as the 300 PRC does. Maybe it's the gun I'm shooting it out of. Who knows?
I think a lot of
I'd rather shoot my 300 PRC than my old 270.
yeah. Well, and a lot of that probably comes down to rifle build because Ryan. I'm guessing your 300 PRC, the 300 PRCs that we shoot, they're in really high quality stocks with recoil impulse, muzzle brakes, suppressors, and then you grab an old Ruger M77 30-06 with a wood stock and a metal butt plate. Yeah, and it knocks the teeth out of your mouth.
Yep.
That's fair. Well, and it doesn't fit you. So not only is it not nice components, it's not a good fit. And I'm a huge fan of having a gun fit you. And trying to put my face on a wood stock that was made in the late 60s. It's not gonna, I'm not gonna be able to ride the recoil as well.
Yeah, 100%. So in that 300 PRC vein, being the ultimate North American cartridge for hunting, and that's a great assessment because you could absolutely kill anything on this continent with that cartridge. But you said you took your last 4 elk with a 6.5 Creedmoor, and we get that question all the time, like, is it enough for elk? And the general response is like, is it enough? Yes, you can kill anything with the right shot. Is it optimal? Likely not. But there are people all over the country that are doing it, and it's good to hear. Obviously, you're a pretty proficient marksman, we'll say. So from a shot placement standpoint, that's not a question. But what has been your experience hunting elk with that cartridge? What have you seen from a terminal performance standpoint? And then just for my personal satisfaction, what kind of rifle are you hunting with in 6.5 Creedmoor?
So good questions. This is going to be interesting on the Hornady podcast. We'll see if this is where we start to disagree. I don't buy into the modern theory of retained bullet weight and super bonded held together bullets for hunting. I actually believe, in my experience, that a bullet that goes into the vitals of an animal and effectively disintegrates or explodes kills quicker, better, and more reliably for me. So for like your ELD bullets, I'd be more likely to shoot an ELD match bullet hunting than the ELDX on an elk especially. I shoot at a 6.5 Creedmoor. I've been shooting soft point 6.5 Creedmoor. So 140 grain soft point bullets are just dropping elk like bad habits. And I've seen elk get shot multiple times with things like a 300 rum. Some elk want to live, and some elk can wear a decent shot like an old t-shirt. Like, it doesn't even faze them. And I've been lucky enough that these last few elk, and especially in Africa, which they're pretty hardy animals too, even the plains game, this soft point 6.5 Creedmoor that I've been using, or target 6.5 Creedmoor, either one, it is devastating on how quick it kills them, how humanely it kills them, how little they run, and every one of them's been a one-shot drop. I think one of the animals I finished off with a pistol when I walked up just to put out its misery, but it was on the ground. So I don't believe in that. My daughter has taken 2 elk now. She just turned 11, and she got her second elk in November. She took both with 6.5 Creedmoor. The second one she took with a solid copper bullet, and I'm not the biggest fan of those because, again, that's the antithesis of what I think a hunting bullet should do. Again, my personal opinion only. It sizzled straight through the elk, and the exit hole was arguably smaller than the entrance hole. It just went straight through in a line. But it was a cow elk, and she stutter stepped about 10 inches and fell over and let out her last breath. So it clearly worked. I can't complain. But my daughter put an awesome shot on it and put it right down. The rifles I've been using.
Yeah, little cartridge, big results.
Well, you put it where it needs to go, right? So when people ask me all the time, is 6.5 Creedmoor enough for elk? I'll say green tip 223 is enough for elk if you hit it in the right spot. But if you shoot it in the ear with a 50 BMG, it's not going to kill it. So you got to put the bullet where it needs to go. I would not recommend for new shooters and new hunters a 6.5 Creedmoor. Because if I see an elk 300 yards away from me across a canyon, quartering away from me, I have the discipline not to shoot at it. I know I'm going to go either find a way to get closer or get a better shot. 6.5 Creedmoor cannot ethically make that shot. You're going to wound an animal, and sorry if I offend anyone on this one too, but shame on you. You should not be doing that. You need something like a 300 Win Mag or higher to drive through 4 or 5 feet of meat to get to the vitals when it's that far away. So knowing what your gun can do is a lot. Knowing your capabilities as a shooter is a lot. Being able to actually put the shot where it needs to go is a lot. So that's why I just explain it with the margin for error. 6.5 Creedmoor gives me very little margin for error. I need to have the right shot. 300 Win Mag is a little better. 300 PRC is a little better. You can keep going up the scale, but at some point you got to stop and still make a good shot. The rifles I've used. In Africa, I took a Barrett Fieldcraft. I don't know if you guys have ever seen one of those.
Mm-hmm.
You familiar with what the Forbes rifle is, or used to be?
I'm not familiar with the Forbes.
Those Forbes Ultralights. Barrett bought the Forbes. You guys got to look this one up. It's a cool history in our firearms industry. So the Forbes Ultralight rifle, he made effectively a super slimmed down, kind of skeletonized, super lightweight 700-ish action and rifles. And these were called Forbes rifles. And in my gun safe, I have serial number 1 of the Forbes rifles I found in a gun shop, sitting there. Serial number 1. I couldn't believe it was sitting there.
Wow.
And then I went and checked the serial number for everything online, and you look at, in the 90s, it was getting more popular. So Guns and Ammo and all these articles written about the Forbes rifles all have that rifle that I have in my safe in the pictures. That's the one they sent out for all the testing, number 1. You can see in the pictures. It's pretty cool. So I think it was Melvin Forbes, I think is his first name.
That is cool.
It's cool. That one knocks your teeth out. That's in 30-06. And with the scope, I think I'm at 6 pounds or 6.5 pounds. So yeah, it hurts. So he made the Forbes Ultralight rifle, and it was a really popular super ultralight hunting rifle. Barrett bought that company, tweaked the designs to make them easier to manufacture with modern machinery, and that's where the Fieldcraft was born. It's just a modernized Forbes rifle. So I take that ultralight Fieldcraft all through Africa. I've taken a couple elk with it. My daughter has used the SIG Cross for both of her elk because that rifle is just so modular for her to adjust the stock and adjust the cheek piece. And she's taken both of them standing off a tripod. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah. I think just to address what you were talking earlier about bullet performance and cartridge selection using the Creedmoor on elk. Like you'd mentioned, Hornady doesn't advocate using match bullets for hunting, but what we can agree on is lead core bullets that expand pretty rapidly, like our ELDX, maybe the SST. You said you're using, some Spire Point bullets. Lead core bullets are amazing. Lead always has been and likely always will be just an outstanding material to use as a bullet core. And from a terminal performance standpoint, there's a ton of benefit there. Now, like you said, on the monolithic bullet, you used a homogeneous bullet and it blew, clean through the elk. I think that to say all that, what I'm getting at is what really matters is as the shooter, as the hunter, you do some research and you find out what bullets and how they perform and which one suits your tastes. Because there are some people that if that bullet doesn't blow through the other side and give you an exit hole, they don't want to hunt with it. And there's a certain type of bullet that will do that almost every time. And then there's a whole bunch of people in your camp where I want that bullet to get into the vinyls and I want it to grenade and destroy. I want those lungs to look like Jell-O. And typically a rapid expanding lead core bullet will do that. And it's just about doing a little bit of homework. And unfortunately, you have to sort through the end user. There's a lot of misinformation out there. And it can be tough at times to sort through all that and pull all the weeds away and find out, okay, this is how this bullet design performs and this is how this one performs. But it takes a little bit of research, a little bit of time, but find out what you like, what performance you like, and then find the bullet that gives you that type of performance. So it kind of all comes back to doing a little bit of homework for yourself. Set yourself up for success.
Yeah, we make a bullet for both camps. And Seth and I both got our start in the technical services portion of Hornady manufacturing, so we've answered all the emails and taken all the phone calls, and typically somebody will say they didn't like the way a bullet performed. Well, guess what? We have a bullet for the exact thing that you want to happen. So you're right. A little bit of homework can go a long ways.
Well, that's a fair way of doing it. I appreciate your guys' diplomatic answer there. I know you can't advocate a target bullet. I can, but you guys can't. I get that. Yeah, we all have different preferences. That's why there's so many different types. One of my favorite arguments to counter is when somebody shows me a picture of the animal they shot, or they have a picture of a bullet in their hand, and they say, "Look how this bullet failed."
Isn't that ironic?
If you've got a bloody bullet in your hand, it didn't fail.
Yeah, and that's
Right? I'm like, or they'll ask me all the time, "What's the retained weight?" I have no idea. I can tell you how many pounds of steak I have.
Yeah. And I think it's just because a bullet did not perform to your expectations doesn't mean it failed if what you expected it to do didn't align with how the bullet was designed to perform from the get-go. So yeah, just because of your predetermined expectation of how it should have performed, if that doesn't align with how the bullet was designed, then yeah, you're setting yourself up to be disappointed. And you could easily call things failures when at the end of the day, you're standing over a dead animal with a bloody bullet in your hand.
Yeah, and that's why I think I started this off with, I don't necessarily agree with laying everything at the altar of retained bullet weight. If I'm hunting, what I care about is an ethical kill on an animal. I don't care if that's, for you, the most bullet retained weight, or if that's a bullet that disintegrates like I like. I don't care. When I'm target shooting, I care about the most accurate impact I can get. I don't care about retained weight or things like that. So I would just encourage people to focus on actually why they're shooting that bullet. And like you said, figure out what works for them. Like monolithic bullets, I'm actually a fan of monolithic bullets because there's a lot of benefits to them. However, in my experience, the smaller calibers don't seem to work as well because I think something about a solid copper bullet seems to work really good in my experience with 30 cal and above. And my shooting, when it gets below 30 cal, maybe they're too narrow, maybe there's not enough of a cavity in there to really open up very well. But yet, again, I can't complain. My daughter dropped her elk, like I said, it walked 10 inches, ethical, clean kill, and I don't have little bits of lead sprinkled throughout the inside of the animal. That sounds like it worked too.
Yeah, it sounds like it worked great. I guess I have a little bit of experience. I grew up shooting lead core bullets, as we all did. Monolithic is a relatively new thing in the shooting and hunting industry, but I've been a part of 2 animals getting taken with our 130 grain CX, one after release, one pre-release. And to me, the animals act differently when shot with those bullets than I'm traditionally used to. However, they make an audible sound that is totally different than a lead core bullet, and I know that it is making some temporary wound cavity that you may not see after everything's back to not being squirrely gelatin. But I can say that in ballistics gelatin, the CX's or GMX's, whatever that may be, the temporary wound cavity is absolutely gigantic.
Yeah.
So it is disrupting tissue, but I do agree. I think the animals act a little bit differently when taken with those, in my experience, my short little bit of experience.
Well, one is, I don't think they're getting hit with the energy, not talking wound cavities, just talking pure energy. A lead core bullet, I think hitting enough meat acts more like a punch to an animal. When sometimes if that bullet sizzles through, it happens so quick, it's a shock to their system. It's still going to kill them, but I don't think they realize what happened as much. They didn't feel that punch as much, from what I've seen. But the point is, there's all sorts of bullet designs for all different types of shooting, and like you guys said, figure out what works for you and shoot it. Just, I don't want to bash on people that are trying to take long-range hunting, because I know that's popular for a lot of people, and who am I to say how you hunt? But I'm an advocate of always getting as close as I possibly can, always waiting for the best shot I possibly can. And when it comes to those situations, guys, any bullet's going to work. Like you said, Seth, if an arrow works, I'm not hunting any animals that an arrow wouldn't also work on, right? So if an arrow is enough to kill that animal, any bullet design is going to work to kill that animal as well. It's just...
Yeah, they're not hunting dinosaurs.
Yeah, I mean, know your limits, folks. So here's something to talk about long range instead of just bullets for you guys. I'm an advocate for training and learning how to shoot better is getting less stable. So if you want good performance, you need to get your rifle and yourself as stable as you possibly can. Good performance meaning on paper or on the target. You want the best grip possible? Great, get as stable as you can. But if you want to get better as a shooter, I think you need to get unstable, because that stability hides all your errors, right? The reason why I won't ask you guys to admit it. I'll admit it. That every once in a while, I still catch myself jerking the trigger when I'm shooting. Whenever I catch myself doing that, it's almost always when the chamber is empty on a gun. Okay? I'll be shooting a pistol, having fun, and then after about an hour of shooting, sure enough, the chamber will be empty, and I'll go click, and I'll dive the muzzle of the gun down into the ground and flinch like crazy, even though I don't think I ever do that. I still will do it sometimes. Well, the reason that happens to some people, like I just admitted happens to me, only when the chamber is empty, it's not because you just happened to do it that time. It's because you had other things going on that were hiding your errors. The recoil of the gun, for example, was hiding that error and you weren't seeing it. Or when you've been laying on that shooting bench all day with your rifle, it was hiding your errors because the stability didn't let the rifle move. The second you stood up with that rifle, the reason you got inaccurate is because now all of your errors are allowed to move the gun around and jerk the gun around. So I'm a huge proponent on stand up and shoot. Get on a knee and shoot. Go use the shooting bench for your hunting rifle to make sure it's zeroed. Once that rifle's zeroed and you've shot a decent group, I don't think you should ever shoot that rifle on a shooting bench again. Even if you're trying to practice shooting at 200 to 300 yards, if it's for hunting, you better be in a hunting position, in my opinion. You better be shooting 200 yards from a knee. You better be leaning up against the post, that's the overhang ramada at the shooting range, like you're leaning on the side of a tree when you're trying to shoot that 200-yard shot. Because that's what's going to get you better. And maybe that's what's also going to make you realize you can't really shoot 300 yards like you think you can in a hunting scenario. So when you're out hunting, you don't take that shot at 300 yards. You don't shoot the animal in the butt and wound it and then complain how the bullet didn't perform, right? You get to learn what your capabilities are and where you can shoot.
Yep, I think that's definitely sage advice. And everybody here, you talk to anybody that works here, and I think collectively as a society, I think the hefty majority of us are in the camp where if you're hunting and you can get one step closer, get one step closer. I'm pretty good at 300. I'm even better at 200. I'm great at 100, and I'm awesome at 50. Even better at 25. I'd like to get as close as we can. One thing, you'd mentioned that your daughter shot her elk off a tripod. Just to touch on that, to hide some more of your errors, man, talk about in the last few years that tripod evolution has really leveled the playing field, and the level of precision that you can achieve with a hunting rifle in a tripod is quite remarkable. Did you see any of the tripod involvement in your military days, or did that all happen after that? And how much do you use your tripods now?
I'm old enough that the tripod came after. The tripods were not around for shooting when I was in. Now, I think the tripod is so crucial as a tool for a long-range shooter, for like a sniper. I think just like even for police, for example, police and military, I think a sniper team would be negligent for not having a tripod with them. That's how effective it is now. One of the hardest things for shooting in an urban situation as a sniper was building up platforms to be able to shoot out of a room over a windowsill or to get at weird angles. It was always a fight to get stable. And we'd be stacking literally chairs on top of tables or backpacks and boxes and doing whatever we could to try and get to good positions, whereas a tripod can do that now. And also, as a sniper, it's a very, very, very boring job. It is not running and gunning and active all the time like it is in the movies. Sometimes you're there for a day and a half staring out the same window at the same spot, you and your buddy, and you've already talked about everything you could possibly think of talking about because you've spent years with this guy. Having a tripod's handy for that too. You can be watching through a rifle and you can take a break and get off the rifle and someone else can walk up and get behind the rifle and it's still aiming exactly where it was. It's pretty handy. So no, tripods are amazing, but you got to have the right one. I have no affiliation with them, but I think the RRS tripods, the really right stuff tripods, my experience, they're the only ones that are suitable for long range shooting. I have some expensive Manfrotto camera tripods. I have some expensive other tripods. For me, they're just not near as stable. They haven't gotten there yet. They're the RS ones are really the only ones that I think are stable enough for me. And I'll do, I filmed another series with the Warrior Poet Society Network on long range shooting. And the last episode of the second series, I take an MRAD in 300 PRC and put everything we talked about in that series together kind of in one shot to the camera. Okay, we're going to focus on this. We're going to set this. We're going to do this. put together and I shoot a mile, and I'm doing it standing off of a tripod effectively. Never would I thought you could ever do that with anywhere but the prone and a super sandbag rifle when I'm sitting there standing. You know, my daughter, she gets it now because she's starting to see around elk camp how jealous everyone else is. But I think the first time in the first couple of years I made her come along with me before I even allowed her to hunt, because I wanted her to pay her dues and understand what was going on. I didn't want to just throw a rifle in front of her and tell her to pull the trigger. She's finally getting now maybe how spoiled she is. You know, she's shooting a SIG cross with a silencer, with a super expensive scope, with really nice ammo off a really right stuff tripod. You know, she's got all the gear figured out. But like you said, for the advancements in technology, you know,
she's got all the gear.
My daughter can easily, standing on that tripod, hit a couple minutes of angle accuracy. You know, where in history have we been able to take an 11-year-old and through a little bit of practice competently hit a 2 minute of angle target every time you at 100 or 200 yards? Technology that we have now and the performance we have now is just amazing, allowing her to do that. You know, when I was that age, I was using an old Remington 700 and 243, and I struggled to shoot as good as she's shooting now.
Yep, no doubt about that. The technological advancements, not only in bullets and barrels and scopes and calculators and kestrels, is just really pushed the industry in a long range type of way. Not even long range, but just things are getting way more accurate than they used to be.
Yeah, and consistent is another one there. Things are more consistent across on the average. You know, you buy a box of ammo of any brand, let's say, and like, yeah, that box shot really well. Well, on the average of that box versus every other lot ever produced of that item number, the accuracy is just getting so much more consistent, and the quality, and it really is an awesome time to be in this industry. Now, I've got a question to change gears here to put you on the spot a little bit. You've got the you know, kind of the beginner level, like you said, the Long Range for Dummies book. We've heard some rumblings of some more of an advanced type book. Is that in the works? What's going on there?
Yeah, a book that never seems to come out. I'm just so overdue on that book. I feel horrible about it, but if I ever announce anything else on social media, I can bet that half the comments that come afterwards are, "Where's the book? Where's the book?" Because everyone wants, which is great. That's a great problem to have. I'm glad that people are a fan enough of my work that they want more. But one, I've allowed myself to get distracted. For some good reasons. You know, Mayday Safety, that software company, took me 2 years of my life. So I was distracted for that, and I was happy to do that because I hope we're saving lives there. But then when I get down to it, I'm writing it now. I'm making good progress on it. I actually was working on it last night. But one of the reasons why it's taken so long is almost that the first book did so good. Like, when I wrote the first book, I had nothing to lose, right? Because who cares if anyone's going to take it or not? Now the first book did good enough that, I mean, I'm fortunate enough. It's still the #1 bestseller in its category on Amazon 6 years later. That's crazy. So I can rattle off that beginner stuff off the top of my head. The advanced stuff, there's some stuff I don't know. I got to look up on my own to write the book. You know, reloading, I can put bullets together or cartridges together. I can tailor a load that works for me, but there are theories on tailoring a load for accuracy that I have to read 5 different sources on just so I can understand that theory. And so part of it has been, I don't ever want to put out a book that purports that I know more than I do, right? I also want to keep it simple and explain, you know, understandable for people. I don't want to go too far in the weeds on the advanced stuff. And some of the topics aren't even that advanced I left out. So I've just been struggling all over the place going, you know, kind of the self-doubt of how do I get this book out there on advanced topics that makes it still just as simple. And part of my solution that I'm going towards now is it might not be the advanced book at all. The way it's being written now is it's just going to be volume 2. You know, because I like to, in my first book, I spent the first third of the book, maybe mind-numbingly for some people, just saying, this is a bullet, this is a case, this is a primer, you know, explaining the absolute basics of everything before I got into the more details, you know, the crawl, walk, run theory. With the advanced book, and I get into reloading, for example, I knew I had to spend, because there's a big section on reloading, I have to explain what a press is. What's the difference between a single stage press and a progressive press? I've got to explore that. I've got to go back and explore the basics, the components. And the more I did that, the more I realized, well, this is boring. This is the basics of reloading stuff. This isn't advanced anything, before I can get into the advanced. And so I guess that's my super long way of explaining that it might not be advanced at all. It might just end up being volume 2 that maybe covers more advanced topics, but still in the same basic way.
I think that's I think a good direction to go. It doesn't have to necessarily be advanced in the title, but just the natural progression of you've got the volume 1, you've digested it, you're using it, you're putting that stuff into practice, and now here's the next things to be concerned with. And it's not like you haven't had a plate full of many other things to do besides just focus solely on the book. Like you said, you had that time on your first one where you could really focus on it. So you've been doing other things. So before we wrap up here, is there anything else you want to leave our listeners with? From what you're doing, any of your companies or your businesses? Is there anything you wanna mention that we haven't yet, Ryan?
Well, I appreciate that. I have too much going on, so that's another reason Gun University is there, is to kind of be a hub for everything else. So if you just want to come find Gun University, that's where you can find out everything you need about FFLs. That'll point you that direction. You want to find out about books, it'll point you in that direction. And man, we just love having people come by and interact. The last kind of plug for it is we just introduced a new rating system where we give guns grades because the name is University. So every gun gets a report card on value and accuracy and reliability, and it gets a little letter grades like you're in school. Is we decided that another thing the industry was missing was a chance for people to have their own voice. So we just made, and it works now, kind of like Rotten Tomatoes for guns. So you read a review I write about a gun, I might give it a B-, and here's the report card, and here's why I got it. I now end that report card on every single gun with, what do you think? Am I right or wrong? You tell me. And you get to now come in and put in your grade. And so for every gun in our catalog, you can go through and see what the reviewer's grade was and the reader's grade. And we're just hoping that you guys appreciate that kind of thing, and you want to help build the community and give advice to other people and learn at the same time. So stop by and we'd appreciate it.
That's awesome. Well, we will make sure to put a link to that in the description here below on this podcast so listeners can check out Gun University. Preston, anything before we wrap up here?
No, I'm extremely delighted.
Awesome. Well, Ryan, I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your already busy day. We talked about all the stuff you got going on. Plus, raising kids is never anything but time consuming. And we appreciate you, sitting down with us. And we'll look forward to maybe a second edition of the Long Range Handbook there. And again, thanks for coming on with us. Everybody that's listening, thanks for checking out this podcast, and we'll catch you on the next one.